a quiet afternoon in Burkina Faso, a man walked past a small village cemetery. He expected silence, but instead, he heard the faint sound of sobbing. As he followed the sound, his eyes fell upon a sight that froze him where he stood. A little girl, no older than 8, sat trembling beside 2 fresh graves. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she clutched the earth with tiny hands, whispering the names of her parents, the ones she had just buried. She had no one left, no family, no hope. And in that moment, a question burned in the air. What would you do if you found a child in such unbearable pain? As Ibrahim Traoré walked slowly through the narrow path of the village cemetery, he noticed how the sun was beginning to sink behind the horizon, throwing long shadows across the dusty ground. The silence of the place was heavy, almost sacred. But cutting through that silence was a sound no heart could ignore, the faint, broken sobs of a child. He followed the sound, and soon his eyes fell on a little girl, sitting beside 2 freshly dug graves. Her small body trembled as though the weight of the world had crushed her tiny shoulders. She was barefoot, her clothes worn and dusty, her face streaked with tears that had carved lines of sorrow far beyond her age. With both hands, she clutched the loose soil on the graves as if holding on to her parents one last time. She whispered their names again and again, her voice weak, almost vanishing with the evening breeze. Ibrahim stopped in his tracks. His chest tightened, and for a moment he could not move. He saw not just a grieving orphan, but a child staring into an endless void of loneliness. He imagined her waking up tomorrow with no mother to comfort her, no father to protect her, no family to call her own. The thought sent a shiver down his spine. As he stood there, memories flooded back his own struggles as a boy. The moments he too had felt abandoned by life. The nights when hope was no more than a faint dream. And suddenly the distance between him and the child vanished. She was no longer a stranger. She was a mirror of a pain he had once known. The cries of that little girl pierced deeper than words. In that moment, Ibrahim understood something with absolute clarity. This was not a scene he could walk past. This was not sorrow he could leave behind. This child's pain demanded more than sympathy, it demanded action. Ibrahim stood frozen, his mind torn between 2 worlds. On one side, there was the voice of reason telling him to step back, to give the girl space in her grief. After all, who was he to interfere in the most sacred, painful moment of her life? But on the other side, there was his heart, loud, restless, refusing to let him turn away. He thought about what this little girl would face once she left that cemetery. The harsh reality of life without parents. No home to sleep in, no hand to hold, no one to whisper to her that everything would be all right. The idea of her wandering alone through the world, hungry and afraid, made his stomach twist. And then came another thought, the kind that changes everything. What if this was my child? What if fate had stolen my own daughter, leaving her to cry beside my grave? Wouldn't I pray that someone, anyone, would show her kindness? He clenched his fists, struggling with the weight of the moment. He wasn't just making a choice for that evening, he was about to step into this child's entire future. To walk away meant condemning her to a life of misery. To step forward meant taking responsibility, perhaps for years to come. It wasn't an easy decision. Leaders are often trained to think of nations, not individuals. But as he looked into the girl's tear-soaked face, Ibrahim realized that leadership without humanity was hollow. A title means nothing if it cannot ease the suffering of even one innocent soul. The decision formed quietly but with unshakable certainty. He would not leave her to fate. He would not let this moment pass like a shadow in the night. Ibrahim understood that this was not chance, it was a test, and he would answer it with compassion. With slow, steady steps, he began walking towards the girl, ready to change her life forever. Ibrahim's footsteps crunched softly against the dry earth as he moved closer. The girl didn't notice him at first. Her eyes were locked on the graves, her body trembling from the force of her sobs. For a moment, he just stood behind her, watching, his heart aching at the sight. Then slowly, he lowered himself to one knee, bringing himself down to her level. He reached out, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. The girl flinched, startled, and turned her tear-stained face upward. Her eyes, red, swollen, filled with a depth of sorrow no child should carry, met his, and in that instant time seemed to freeze. There was no leader, no soldier, no village. Just a man and a child, both bound by the silent understanding of pain. Ibrahim spoke softly, his voice steady but tender. "You are not alone."
Not anymore.
The words hung in the air, delicate yet powerful, like a promise carved into eternity. The girl blinked as though unsure if she had heard correctly. Slowly, uncertainly, she leaned into his embrace, and Ibrahim wrapped his arms around her, holding her as if she were his own daughter, shielding her from a world that had already taken too much. That night, he didn't return home empty-handed. He carried her with him. Arrangements were made for food, clothing, and a safe place to sleep. He ensured she had a bed, clean clothes, and warm meals. But beyond these physical needs, he gave her something far more precious: reassurance. Every time she looked at him, she saw someone who would not abandon her, someone who had chosen to stand in the gap where her parents once stood. And the villagers saw it too. Some were stunned, a leader of his stature kneeling beside a poor orphan girl. Others were moved to tears, whispering among themselves that this was the kind of leadership they had prayed for. For them, it wasn't just an act of kindness. It was a declaration that no one, no matter how small or forgotten, would be left behind. That evening marked a turning point. For the little girl, it was the first step back toward life. For Ibrahim, it was the beginning of something larger than himself. Days passed, then weeks. Slowly, the little girl began to change. At first, she barely spoke, her eyes still carrying the shadow of the cemetery. She would wake up in the middle of the night, crying for her parents, her small voice trembling in the darkness. But every time Ibrahim or someone from his household was there offering comfort, reminding her that she was not alone anymore. With time, the fear in her eyes gave way to something else. Hope. She started to smile again, shy at first, but real. She learned to laugh with other children, to play, to eat without the weight of sorrow crushing her chest. The transformation was slow, but it was visible. The little orphan girl who once clutched the dirt of her parents' graves was beginning to find life again. But the impact didn't stop with her. The story of what Ibrahim had done spread through the village, then beyond. People whispered about the day their leader knelt down in the dust beside an orphan child and lifted her into his arms. It was more than charity. It was an example. If a man of power could humble himself for the sake of one forgotten soul, then what excuse did anyone else have? Soon others began to act. Families who had once turned away from orphans began opening their doors. Widows received support, children were offered food and schooling, and neighbors started looking out for each other in ways they never had before. The ripple widened further still. To the people, Ibrahim was no longer just a president or a leader. He was a symbol of compassion. His single act of kindness had awakened something in their hearts. They began to see that true strength was not in wealth, not in armies, not even in authority, but in the courage to care for those who could give nothing in return. For the girl, it meant survival. For the community, it meant renewal. And for Ibrahim himself, it became a defining moment, a reminder that leadership was not about standing above others, but kneeling beside them. Years later, the little girl who once wept alone in the cemetery grew into a young woman with dreams, strength, and a future she thought she would never have. She carried scars, yes, but also a heart filled with gratitude. Every step she took was proof that a single act of kindness could rewrite the story of a life once doomed to despair. For Ibrahim, the memory of that day never faded. Whenever he looked at her, he remembered the moment he first heard her cries, the weight of his decision, and the choice to act. It became a constant reminder of why he led, not for titles, not for recognition, but for the lives entrusted to him. And the lesson stretched far beyond that village. People spoke of it in marketplaces, in schools, even in distant towns. They spoke of a leader who reminded them that compassion is not weakness, it is power. Power to heal, power to unite, power to transform. The truth is, none of us know when life will place us at such a crossroads. None of us know when we will stand before someone broken, desperate, and alone. But in that moment, we hold the power to change everything. Because real strength is not found in crowns or offices, not in riches or fame. Real strength is found in the courage to reach out when others turn away, in the willingness to lift up a soul when the world has pushed them down. One man, one choice, one act of kindness saved a little girl's future. And it reminds us all of a simple but eternal truth. When you choose compassion, you don't just change one life, you change the world around you. If this story touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs hope today. And if you believe the world needs more compassion, hit that like button and subscribe for more true stories that remind us of the power of kindness. Together we can spread light one story at a time.